Hello and welcome to the 5th day of January 2021. My name's Kurt and this is my Good Life meditation. It's basically my remembrance of yesterday and how I did applying my objectives and principles towards the challenges of the day, making the day a better day. How did I sleep last night? Reminding myself of what those objectives and principles are, and then planning for the day's living. Let's do it. Yesterday was another good day at work, a very solid day. I was mainly working on a particular document that really did take the whole day. I was lucky that I was able to collaborate with a coworker who together we were able to set the course for the document. And I have 3 more days, including today, remaining in this week. And I expect that I might have a chance of even finishing the first draft of the document by the end of the week. Fingers crossed. No real surprises yesterday. Didn't get ambushed by anything. No real opportunities to have to push the limits of my creed. So that's good and bad, right? It's good when you're pushed, get a chance to practice. But it's nice to have a day off, so to speak, when life gives you a break. Excuse me. Okay, let's begin. 7 objectives. The first of these is to be always ready to die. The second is to make good and effective use of the time that I have. Number 3 is to develop and maintain good and sound life principles. The principles that pursue not only a virtuous ends, but are of themselves internally consistent. They withstand the test of reason. That's the soundness part. The next objective is to cultivate good emotional reactions. To that end, sorry, excuse me. Living in the desert, air is so much drier out here. In the morning, it really gets me. To that end, there was one thing that I could have done yesterday. No details. I could have withheld my tongue a little more yesterday. There was one case where I said more than I needed to. Didn't really cause any problem, but it would have been better to have been silent. I don't know. I thought about that last night, and I'll remember that today. Oh, there was one other thing from yesterday that I was thinking about. I sent a thank you to my friend Michael over on Discord for his sharing late last year of a video about something called imposter syndrome, where people doubt their abilities and capabilities and mandate by virtue of the fact that they don't necessarily feel like they're qualified to doing what they're doing. And he and I both share that because we're both in the same field. We're both project managers, and sometimes it's easy to feel, because you're in a very public setting as a project manager. You're leading a group, and sometimes you doubt your capabilities as a leader, and that's where the imposter syndrome comes in. And anyway, that video really helped because it helped me to learn that an expert is nothing more than someone who possesses some skill, knowledge, or capability that allows them to achieve some end. And I do have that. Michael has that. A lot of us have that. Doesn't mean you have to necessarily have to have a degree from MIT to be an expert in something that you do in your job because you've practiced it and you've done it many times. That really helped me. It's helped me to be more confident and forthright in my work. There was one more thing yesterday. I wish I hadn't picked up the other dog in one of my meetings yesterday, with a camera on with a lot of people. Shouldn't have done that. Brought undue attention to myself. I don't want that attention. The next principle is the performance of good actions, just doing good things throughout the day, followed by the recognition of true limits and true opportunities, being realistic about my capabilities and opportunity, and then finally, one thing slowly, to do just one thing at a time and to do that thing slowly. Although you can multitask and pet a dog at the same time that you do your meditation. Right, Ollie? Yeah. Let's do my 30 principles now. The first of these is the principle of war. To always be fighting against any proposition of truth that is of some significance, might have a significant impact on our lives. 2, the principle of reason. Reason is the tool that we use in that war. And the sub-principles of honesty, objectivity, and doubt. Next comes the homunculus, the concept of a little man or woman inside our head, our consciousness that is steering the ship and will go down with the ship one day. Maybe today. The next principle is the Anchorhold, picturing a little rock sticking out of a sea of death, and myself perched upon that rock, where the waves rise and fall, the tides lift and recede, and the atmosphere does its thing, rain and lightning and thundering, and sunny days. And I see you over on your rock, and someone else is over there. And though we can't be together, we can wave and shout and holler across the sea. But someday, all of us will go into that sea, and that'll be the end of that. That'll be the end of us, forever. Oh, and that day's coming very soon, for all of us. The next principle is the home of good and evil. The idea that right and wrong, that our ethics, values, our creed are nothing more than our opinions. There is no eternal right and wrong that pervades the universe. There's just opinion. And it's good to work on those opinions because they can't be wrong. That's why the war, that's why the use of reason. The next principle is the principle of purpose. My purpose is to be a good husband and father, to live a virtuous life, and to fulfill and pursue and cultivate my mission, which is the writing of my book, Going Alone, which you can get on Amazon.com, and you can also buy from my website, goingalone.org. These objectives and principles are explained in this book. The next principle is the atomic principle, the proposition that everything is just bits and pieces, energy frozen into matter, atoms building into molecules and subsequently compounds, and then us. But ultimately, frozen energy. And that very soon, this substance, this body that composes me, and the one that composes you, even this little guy here, will all break down, go back to our atomic elements. You know, maybe dissipating away as energy and heat and sound and light. Especially if we can get cremated. disrupting into entropy. Entropy really is our true grave, isn't it? A graveyard called entropy. That'd make a good novel title. The next principle is called the principle of nature. Everything has some particular nature, some way of being, the way that it does things. Excuse me, I still have a little water in my ear from my shower this morning. And it's good to recognize what that nature is. It's the nature of little dogs to sleep on your lap and snore. Next comes the principle of maturity. The idea that we become mature when we collect wisdom over the course of our lives, and then we have the strength to learn from our experiences, particularly our mistakes, the fortitude to live better. Next is the pirate ride, a tentative proposition that free will is an illusion, that though we can make any decision we want, the decision we make is the only decision we could have ever made. We are set on a course by the universe, by all the events before us, and pushed and nudged in all directions in a particular course. And it's not us making those steps necessarily. We are like dominoes falling over in a particular way, but we don't see that. We feel like we're in control. More and more, as every day goes by, I'm more and more convinced that's the truth. Although I can't conclusively prove that or demonstrate it, so I hold it tentatively. I'm willing to be convinced otherwise. It's an article of faith almost. Next comes the social principle, a suggestion that we live better lives as social creatures, looking out for one another and seeking social lives dedicated to improvement and kind of companionship with one another. The next principle is called the principle of public speaking. The idea that when we're communicating, it's best to communicate slowly, deliberately, with keenly chosen words, and words that are readily understood, and to never ever gossip, where gossip is defined as saying things about someone that you would be embarrassed if they overheard you say them. By not speaking in such a way, we avoid gossip. Next comes the Feast of Offal. The Feast of Offal is my reminder that sometimes we've had enough, and we decide that we want to let the whole world know that we've had enough. And then we throw out our upset into the world, throw a tantrum of sorts, and get it all out of our system. But that has a way of just simply spewing our upset on others. Imagine a food fight where you're the only one fighting and everyone else comes out, covered in muck. And then that upsets them. And then that may build in their bodies and minds the sense of upset that they then do the same somewhere else at a later time. And thus it goes on and on, like a shock wave of upset, just ringing through society over and over. This principle reminds me of that fact, and to try to avoid participation in that, either by not having that public upset myself, or by not participating in it when others are displaying their upset. The next principle is called temperance, and it's our controlled consumption of all things, particularly work and play, but also food and drink, and most keenly, what we do with our emotions, how we handle what's happening inside relative to what's just being displayed outside. We can have a we can have a tempest raging in our minds, and yet maintain our balance on the outside, not hiding from that fact, but dealing with it in more mature and tempered manner. There are 3 sub-principles for temperance. These are suffering, simplicity, and apathy. As we suffer when we deny ourselves what we want, when we live a tempered life. And we live a simple life when we live a tempered life, asking for and consuming just very little, and doing very little, but doing and consuming well. And then the 3rd principle is apathy. Sub-principle is apathy. Apathy is our ability to recognize what is outside of our control and to disengage, simply observe it, maybe manage it, protect ourselves and our family from it, maybe capitalize on it in a virtuous way, but still to be disconnected from it. A rainy day, a sudden rainstorm when I'm caught without an umbrella, and my balance, my face doesn't change. My equanimity remains the same. A tax bill that I wasn't expecting. No moderation. I mean, no. My quietude remains. Or the sudden death of a loved one. Doesn't mean we can't react, but it doesn't also mean that we have to let ourselves go. I mean, we can do that within reason, but we collect ourselves and we carry on. We carry on largely because of the next principle, which is the horror show. We carry on because life is recognized as a horror show. There are lots of good things and lots of beautiful things. There's a great amount of love and caring, but there is also a tremendous amount of terrible, dare I say horrible, things that are going on around us and to us, and not just us, but to the creatures that we share the world with, the plants even. It is a horror show to live. And I remind myself of this not in a voyeuristic mind or manner, but simply so that I'm not surprised when I encounter it. And I can again maintain my balance. And I can enlist my reason and my energies and my temperance towards ends that help to improve or alleviate the pain. The next principle is called that which must be borne, carried. And what that is, for the most part, is the horror show. The things that occur to us, that life does sometimes, that we have no choice but to simply live with and move on. Some might want to retreat deep into a hole, seal the door, bolt it, cover the windows, and wait out the storm of life. That's one way. That's perfectly fine. I'd rather lash myself to the mast, leave my ears unplugged from wax, and hear the siren's terrible song as I sail past the rocks. The horror show. I like the way that allusion to Odysseus' journey, his sea voyage, helps with the sub-principle there, hand on the tiller, lashed to the mast. The next principle is the principle of, there's two principles actually that go together: distraction and the great indifference, or agency in the great indifference. Distraction is something that we do throughout our lives so that we don't have to see the apparent awfulness of an empty universe, a universe devoid of any oversight, lacking any God or gods. Apparently, we seem to be quite on our own. A lot of us don't want to see that, so we distract ourselves with everything and anything at all, anything that will keep out the night, keep the cacophony of this party of living going on, so that we don't have to turn around and face the awful indifference. That happened to me last night. I did my first night climb of the mountain behind our house here, which I've named Mount Fortitude. It's not very high. It's about 21 stories. It's about 200 feet or so, 210, 220 feet. It's an easy climb. But I was at the top of it, and behind it, in front of me, I was looking down towards where I live, and I could see the lights of our community below. But behind me is a small wilderness, not very big. I don't think it's big enough to contain a mountain lion. And while I was standing up on top of the mountain with my light off, there was a sudden screech like a woman behind me. And I fumbled for my light and flipped around and beamed it up. And I caught sight of a night bird of some sort, maybe a hawk or an owl, kind of circling around just above me, screeching at me, I guess. And it's kind of symbolic for that, for the civilization below and then the howling wilderness behind. That's what we don't want to see. So instead of climbing Mount Fortitude, as I did last night, we stay down below in the community, lock the doors, turn on all the lights bright, turn on the TV, or distract ourselves with everything, because we don't want to see that the universe is mostly what was behind me last night, an empty, howling void. The Great Indifference. You can read about the Great Indifference in my book, Going Along. Next comes the best seat in the house. A reminder not to want to be anyone else, or be doing anything else, or to be anywhere else, but to be okay where I am, what I'm doing, and who I am. Oh, he's snorty. Next comes the Path of Wildness. It's easy to find. The course of a stream, leaves blown in the wind, a beast's track through the brush, and the direction of our first inclination. Maybe this way. Sometimes there's some doubt. The Path of Wildness is a way to get ourselves unstuck in life, to move forward. And there's no guarantee that the direction that we choose is the right direction. But just collect the facts, think about them, and then if we're still uncertain, then maybe go with our first inclination. Ready for an adventure, ready to also fail, maybe even die. That's the path. The next principle is called the risk of avoiding risk. There are two great categories of risks in our lives. The risk of not at the surface level, more easily accessible, is the risk of, excuse me, pardon me, the risk of not doing what needs to be done to have that settled life I mentioned, to not get an education or get a good job, find a spouse, buy a house, save for retirement, have kids, of course, and then die warm in our bed. Like Betty White, who died this week at almost 100, warm in her bed. Almost everybody would sanction that life, applaud it even. But for some of us, we want something more, or maybe not something more, but something different. We want to actualize whatever, restless bits are inside of us. Go out into the world and have an adventure, and come back with the trophy of experience. That's the deeper level risk, and it's really hard to do both. So my recommendation is to attend to the deep stuff first, early in our life. So in our 20s, go to school, get our education, and then after that, maybe mid-20s to the start of your 30s, it's yours. Off you go into the world, whatever adventure you want. And then when you come back, you'll be ready to attend to the more settled, the nearer risks. It's the best formula I can come up with so far. You'll be behind. Those that started earlier will be well ahead of you, 5 years into their mortgage. Probably, their first kid in preschool, celebrating their 3rd, 4th, 5th wedding anniversary, and you're just starting out. But the deep little lines that form when you remember what you did, and those things build and create the character of who you will be, the stories you can tell, and the sense of peace and satisfaction that will come later in life when kids go off to college and the mortgage is paid and they don't need you so much at work. And now what I do with my life? Well, you already did it, maybe. And then you can just enjoy. What a balance, what a trick that is. So that was the risk of avoiding risk. Next is sin and damnation. The sins in my life are credulity, an overeagerness to believe, hope, want without action or a plan, faith, belief where we convince ourselves that belief alone is all the evidence we need, dogma, where we believe based on the preponderance of words or some canonical collection of ideas that satisfy our sense that truth, the test of truth has been met. A big book. It's in the big book. Authority, another sin, where we believe because we're really impressed by the person that's making the claim. And then gossip, of course, is another sin. And the consequence of these sins is damnation in the here and now, where we live a life believing things that may not be true. Or we're gossiping and soiling ourselves every day, in every way, in the worst possible ways. Building on the horror show, perpetuating the horror through our words, our careless words, reckless words, nasty words. The next principle is called complete oblivion, and it's the proposal that once we're dead, we're gone forever. As I've already mentioned, I have no reason to believe there is any God. I have further, I have no reason to believe that there's anything like a soul. That's why I use the homunculus as my substitute for a soul, because the homunculus is trapped inside me. It's not even real. It's just my consciousness that will snuff out like a candle flame when I die, and then the candle dissolves away into bits and pieces. And therefore, without God, without a soul, there will be no afterlife and nowhere to go for this consciousness of mine once I'm dead, and I will simply be gone forever. And as a result, there will be no reunion with my loved ones after death. No chance to reconcile with anyone that I've left on a sour basis, poor terms with. And there will be no final justice, because there's no afterlife, and no one to here mitigate and apply justice. Next comes the great life adventure. I touched on this a little bit when I talked about the risk of avoiding risk. Maybe in our 20s, give ourselves a chance to have a great life adventure. Something to really, an experience for the ages, both good and bad, salty and sweet, desperate and loving. The type of thing that we carry scars and happy remembrance for the rest of our life. That helps to form our character and make us who we will be for the brief time that we be. Then comes the season of philosophy, which is a time to record what we've learned in our life. And there's a little muse that, for some of us, whispers in our ear. More likely to come whisper in our ear if we've lived a life where there's something maybe to write about. And the key is to not let the whispering go unacknowledged, and that if we want to, we should write down or in some way record what the muse is telling us. Because once she leaves, we will forget. And if she comes back, we will be different. We'll hear differently, and she'll speak different words. So we get one chance to have our season of philosophy, to record our impression of life. That's mine. Next is bullseye aim. The idea that we strive for the mark, but we usually strive for the mark, the target, aim bullseye of the target, but we usually miss. Sometimes by a lot. Sometimes we don't even hit the damn thing. But every now and then we hit the mark. And to expect that. Expect to miss most of the time, but to try nonetheless. Next comes the uphill climb. March, like climbing Mount Fortitude yesterday in the dark. Steadily upward. There's quite a view, but watch out. Shrieking things may be waiting at the top in the dark. I can see I can get a lot of mileage out of this little mountain behind my house. Arena and utility is next. Life is an arena for the living of our lives, the execution of our lives. And all of the principles, our creed, whatever assortment of ideas that we collect to guide us, those are our tools, like utility bits of tools hanging off of a utility belt. There, I said it. That's the correct way to say it. Next is nothing is enough. Just a reminder that so much less is so much better. So often. And then finally, the principle of fun. A reminder to enjoy life and have fun along the way. It doesn't all have to be all the serious stuff all the time. Although it's probably good that it's the serious stuff most of the time. And with that, let's go over our day, a coming day. I think it's going to be a pretty straightforward day. I have 2 meetings. The one meeting is the meeting for my project, my big project for the team. And I have plenty to talk about in that. We can make good use of our hour together. lots of items on the agenda. I really would like to get the communication and training plan finalized so I can send that off to the sponsor. Oh, by the way, the sponsor really came through on the charter on Monday. Really did, I was able to really finish that charter, the whole plan for the project. And you know that I'm done when I take a document, a project plan, and save it as a PDF, because that instantiates it into a non-editable format, non-editable PDF, and then I send that out to the team. And then our work is done, our roadmap is complete. I was able to do that on Monday, and hopefully I'll be able to do that today. Oh no, not the PDF part, but I get the team to agree on the communication and training plan, namely the four lesson curriculum that I'm coming up with, that I came up with, and I can send that to the sponsor by the end of the day. That would be great. And then I'm just going to spend the whole day working on the training manual. I'm gonna really push through it. I'm gonna get that in place. It's gonna be good. And then I'll go for my hike. I'll walk my dogs as usual, go for my hike in the evening, spend time with my family throughout the day. It's really nice being together with us all day long. And that'll be my day. Expect to be ambushed by various and sundries, and expect to never ever hit the mark, but always strive towards the bullseye. That's my plan for the day. I wish you all the best. Please remember to be safe, but not too safe. Take care.